It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thanks so much for being with us. Always great to be able to talk to you every morning. I want to welcome back to the program. We have Dr. Michael Busler with us. He's a public policy analyst, an economics expert, a professor of finance at Stockton University in New Jersey. You've probably seen him as a columnist at Newsmax, LifeZet, and townhall.com. Dr. Busler, welcome back, sir.
Hi, Paul. How are you? It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I really had a blast talking with you last week, and I wanted to have you on again because I'm looking over some of the stuff that Arkansas is thinking about doing, and I know there's a lot of ideas get proposed across the country at a state level, but one of those ideas that we're talking about here in Arkansas is moving away from a gas tax, a traditional gas tax per gallon, and going to indexing our fuel taxes. Can you tell us what index fuel taxes are?
Okay, so most states put a tax on gasoline so many cents per gallon, and they, in theory, use the revenue to help pay for road improvements and infrastructure. So your government officials are saying, look, we raise tax revenue to pay what we have to pay for, but every year, because of inflation, it costs us more to build the roads and the infrastructure. So in order to make sure we have enough revenue to do that, we're going to index the gas tax to inflation. In other words, if you put a 20 cent per gallon tax on gasoline and inflation is 3%, you're going to raise the 20 cent tax by 3%, and you're going to keep doing that every year to make sure there's sufficient revenue to pay the expenses. And that's the theory with doing it. Personally, I think it's a terrible idea. It ends up guaranteeing that you get a tax increase every year, number one. And number two, going back to the theory as to why you need it in the first place, you could argue you really don't need it because if inflation is 3%, then on average the price of gasoline is going to go up 3% also, so you're getting your increase anyway. This is a terrible idea. It's just a way to increase the amount of taxes that consumers pay. And remember, when you put a tax on any consumption, any goods that consumers purchase, if you put a tax on consumption, it's a regressive tax, which means the lower income earners feel it more than the upper income earners. So from that aspect, I don't think it's fair. It's something that's certainly not needed. My vote would be don't do it. The state of Maine had it in, and just recently, because it caused so much problems with consumers, just recently they decided to reverse it and just go back to how they had it before, a certain amount per gallon.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that about Maine. I'm going to look into that. So Maine had an index fuel tax system, and they've gone back the other way because it's it's nice for people who want more and more revenue going to the government, and you're basically saying that this is going to enable, it guarantees them pretty much every year an increase in revenue from the people when it comes to paying for gasoline.
Exactly, and it affects the lower income earners the hardest because most of their income goes to consumption. They don't, because they have low income, they can't save a lot. Mm-hmm. So if you put a tax on any products that consumers buy, any consumption, it's a regressive tax, and I don't favor regressive taxes at all.
Yeah, and folks, there's an article at the front page right now at conduitnews.com. It's a report on the task force on tax reform. And while right now it appears it's a net loss of revenue to the government, meaning more money back in the hands of the people, one of the proposals is to index fuel taxes, indexing them based on inflation rates of construction costs, a minimum of current year rate, max at 3% over the tax rate of the previous year. This could really drive more revenue in the long run over the future. So it certainly is a little bit of a red flag, and that's why I wanted to have Dr. Busler on to talk about this so he could explain exactly what this is and everything else. And so I certainly appreciate that. I want to get your take on when we had you on last week, Dr. Busler. We talked a little bit about China and the tariffs and the trade war, and I love how you said, listen, I'm a free market economist, and so when you hear the word tariffs, it kind of makes you cringe. But then you also had some good things to say about the results of some of the negotiating tactics of the Trump administration. Can you kind of refresh us on that real quick?
Yeah, so Trump, too, is a free market person. He would rather have zero tariffs on everything. So he looks at the trade agreements we have, the NAFTA and with the European Union and with China and a few other countries, and he saw that they were all slanted in favor of our trading partners and to the detriment of us. For instance, with the European Union, they make a car in Germany or Italy, sell it here in the U.S., we charge them 2.5% tariff. American car companies produce a car here, sell it in Europe, they charge us a 10% tariff. Well, the result of that is we're buying a lot of their cars, money flowing out of the country when we pay for it. They're buying fewer of our cars, not much money of theirs is flowing in our country. We end up with a huge negative balance of trade to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars every year. Well, Trump said we have to fix this. So he talks to the trading partners and said, hey, we have to renegotiate. They're in no hurry to renegotiate. They're in a great position. So, if Trump was a politician, what would happen is they would convene a summit sometime in October. Our people would talk to their people. They'd come back. We'd discuss it for another 6 months. They'd meet again. And before you know it, you end up kicking the can down the road to the next guy, and nothing happens. President Trump says he's a business person. He's not a politician. A business person has to confront problems immediately because it's going to affect your bottom line. You can't have that happening. So Trump wanted to confront this as quickly as possible. You have trading partners who are reluctant to come to the table. So what does a business person do? You create a sense of urgency. So by putting on the tariffs on China, and they're going to hurt the Chinese far more than their Chinese retaliation will hurt us. China's economy depends on selling much of their output to the rest of the world, and much of that goes to the U.S. So if we stop buying their products, they're going to be in trouble, particularly considering all the debt they've used to run this up. Mm-hmm. So we put these big tariffs on, and the idea is let's bring them to the table and come up with a free trade agreement, trying to get as close as possible to no tariffs on anything.
So my next question, we're talking to Dr. Michael Busler. What do you think about economic incentive programs when it comes to the government picking winners and losers, and winners essentially in this case, when they give taxpayer money or incentives to try to bring companies in to quote, create jobs? What are your general thoughts on that economic development idea?
Yeah, this is a difficult issue. Your first choice would be to have an American company come in, build, and you not have to give any incentives. That would be your first choice. If you can't get that, then the next choice is, there are companies that are building plants that we'd like to have in our area. For instance, Amazon is building a new headquarters, and they've looked at a bunch of sites. Each site is offering them a tremendous amount of tax incentives to locate in their municipality. And, of course, the reason is simple. Once Amazon comes with, I think they're looking at 50,000 employees, it's an economic boon to the area. So people say, well, look, if we use some taxpayer money to lure them here, we're going to more than get it back. Now, there's some debate whether that's a good idea or a bad idea, but that's the theory. Now, suppose you have a foreign company from China, for instance, looking to build a plant in the U.S. Well, we'd like to get the plant here in, you would say, in Arkansas, so we may have to give some incentives to lure them here. Is it a good idea or a bad idea? Well, as long as the foreign company like China is not doing anything with proprietary knowledge and is not stealing any trade secrets or anything, but if they're coming to build a plant in the U.S. anyway, you'd like to get it in Arkansas, perhaps you can use some tax dollars to lure the company here. So there's no real clear-cut answer whether this is a good idea or a bad idea. It depends on what side you're coming down on. Clearly, you don't want to use taxpayer money to go to a company outside of the U.S. On the other hand, if you can invest $100 of taxpayer money and it generates $1,000 worth of activity with new jobs and the purchasing power that the new employees have, that may be a good investment.
I really appreciate your thoughts on that. I mean, I to be honest, I disagree with the concept of, giving taxpayer dollars to companies to try to get them to locate here, because I think if they can be recruited here, they can be recruited away. I would rather just, eliminate the corporate income tax and things like that, try to treat all businesses equally. Here in Arkansas, it's a strange situation because we have a skilled workforce shortage. And so we have a situation here, Dr. Busler, where existing Arkansas businesses and their tax dollars are going to recruit, whether it's China or whether it's any company, a business to come in here and then be able to hire existing employees away, right, at a higher subsidized wage. And they claim that that's a job created, when in fact that's not a job created. I mean, how many of these jobs are going to be filled by people who are right now on the couch, watching TV? And that's where the rub is how do you actually gauge the effectiveness of this? But regardless of that, I'm a realist. I understand. Look, I may disagree with this, but all states are doing it. Every state out there sweetens the pie and does that sort of thing. So, but my question is this. If you have China and you have the fact that they're stealing $600 billion of intellectual property a year, according to estimates, and then you have this trade war, it really doesn't make much sense to me to do business with China in the state of Arkansas like we are. We are attempting, not just with one, but with 3 other companies. I know one of them may still go through, but the other 3 are on hold because of the trade war. But it just doesn't make sense. And my question is this. If this were Russia, I feel like everybody would, kind of spin out of control if we were trying to cut these deals with a Russian company. But because it's China, it's somehow more acceptable, even though we have the FBI saying, hey, look, we've got investigations into their economic activity in all 50 states. They're stealing from us. They're trying to supplant the United States. What are your thoughts? Is it wise to do business with China given the current geopolitical situation?
Well, I think it's wise to do business with them if we have agreements with them that protect some of the vital interests of the U.S. You made a very key statement there. You said here in Arkansas, we really have a shortage of high-skilled labor. If that's the case, there's very little reason to spend taxpayer dollars to bring in companies that are going to take some of the high-skilled labor away from Arkansas companies. The areas that are offering incentives are areas where they have an oversupply of labor and they really need new companies to come in to provide jobs. Based on what you said, that's not the case in Arkansas. So I think the argument for subsidizing Chinese companies to come in and take skilled labor when you don't have enough to go around as it is, I think that argument goes away, and I don't think now it makes any sense to spend taxpayer dollars to bring Chinese companies in.
I appreciate you coming on the program. It's always great to talk to you, Dr. Michael Busler. And I followed you on Twitter after our interview. Did you see that? Did you see that?
Yeah, I did see that, yes.
All right, folks,
I appreciate that.
It's at @mbusler, @MBUSLER on Twitter. Follow him. He is an economics professor, finance professor at Stockton University, public policy analyst, and you can see him as a columnist over at Newsmax, LifeZet, and townhall.com. Dr. Busler, thank you so much for spending time with us this morning.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
All righty. Thank you. Folks, we're going to take a break. We're going to be back.